A swirl of frost-laced wind hits Daniel's face the moment he steps out of his car. Black coattails flapping against the flurry of snow. The Winter Ball has been the most anticipated event of the year, a glittering palace of music-rich wines and elite company. But for Daniel, it's another stark reminder that he's walking in alone. He steels himself determined not to let memories of the past taint his evening. Then across the ballroom's grand foyer, he catches sight of her Eleanor, his ex-wife. She isn't alone. She's holding the hands of 4 children who each carry the exact color and shape of his own eyes. The Winter Ball took place in the heart of Manhattan at the luxurious Plaza Hotel near Central Park. Crisp December air clung to Daniel White's every breath as he made his way past doormen who greeted him with polite nods. The swirling lights of the city reflected on the fresh snowfall, granting an almost fairy tale aura to the evening. Inside, the hotel's lobby dazzled with poinsettias, golden wreaths, and artful Christmas trees. The florid notes of a string quartet wafted through the corridor, luring him toward the grand ballroom. Daniel, 37 years old, had always been considered dashing. Tall with a chiseled jaw and haunted green eyes, he moved with a confident grace that came less from ego and more from an innate sense of self. Yet tonight, an uninvited pang of loneliness gripped his heart. Attending the ball alone was never his plan. Just a year ago, he had imagined standing here with his wife Elena on his arm, both of them in elegantly tailored outfits, exchanging polite smiles with Manhattan's elite, forging connections for their philanthropic endeavors. But life had taken a brutal turn. He and Elena parted ways under painful circumstances that still felt raw. Despite the veneer of normalcy, he attempted to wear Tom Ford suit perfectly, knotted tie, polished demeanor. Daniel felt like an open wound in the midst of a glittering crowd. Every decoration, every swirl of laughter, every passing perfume reminded him of the life he had lost. He tried to distract himself by thinking of small talk about his work at Harrington and White Investments, about the latest Wall Street Journal headlines about the real estate deals the firm had lined up. He thought of the people he might meet tonight. Potential clients, old friends, distant acquaintances like Teresa Wilson from his days at Yale, and donors who might support his cherished cause, the foundation he'd created in honor of his late father to fund scholarships for underprivileged kids. The grand double doors to the ballroom stood open, revealing a dazzling space, sparkling chandeliers, marble floors, and swirling couples in formal attire. As Daniel stepped across the threshold, he felt both an unsettling excitement and a sense of dread. Somewhere in this crowd, there could be a face from the past. Elena's face, perhaps, but in the swirl of suits and gowns, he couldn't immediately see her. He exhaled slowly, reminding himself that this evening was meant to be a fresh start, or at least a test of his ability to move on. After all, Elena had carved her own path, seemingly uninterested in the shared dreams they'd once built. He clenched his fists in his pockets. This night is for me, he thought. I'm going to enjoy myself, come what may. Daniel's mind drifted back to the day he first met Eleanor. It was during a summer internship at a hedge fund in Boston, back when they were both wide-eyed graduate students. She was bold, brilliant, and carried an aura of mystery that captivated him. Elena's luscious dark hair framed her olive complexion, and her deep brown eyes flashed with ambition. She had come from a modest background in Montreux, Switzerland, and her accent, along with her fierce determination, made her stand out among the crowd of interns. Their attraction was instant, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen glances at coffee breaks. By the end of the internship, they'd begun a relationship that seemed as bright and promising as their future careers. Within 2 years after they'd finished graduate school, he at Yale, she at Columbia, they married in a private ceremony officiated at a small chapel in upstate New York. His mother, Carol White, and her father, André de la Montagne, blessed the union with tears of joy. Yet as they built their careers, cracks began to form. Both were ambitious. Both wanted the best for themselves, and ironically, that drive which once unified them started to push them apart. Eleanor felt stifled by the conventional life Daniel seemed to desire, a suburban home, dinner parties, early nights. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to keep up with Eleanor's relentless push for success and adventure. She took job opportunities in Hong Kong and Zurich, while Daniel remained in New York to care for his ailing father and to stabilize his fledgling investment firm, Harrington and White, which he co-founded with his best friend from college, James Harrington. Long, silent months apart replaced the passion they once shared. Emails and texts became the main medium of communication. The final blow came when his father passed away, and Elena didn't show up to the funeral. She was stuck in a negotiation in Shanghai, or so she claimed. Daniel never forgave her for that. The day after the funeral, he filed for divorce. The year since the divorce was granted felt like a haze of regrets and half-hearted attempts to move forward. Daniel's mother tried to console him. James Harrington tried to bury him in work, hoping he'd forget his heartbreak in corporate success. But the hurt ran deep. He wasn't just losing Elena. He was losing the idea of the family he had so desperately wanted to build, the stability he had vowed to create, a vow that was broken. Little did he know that this fateful night at the winter ball would unravel secrets that would cut deeper than he ever imagined. A month ago, Daniel had almost declined the invitation to the winter ball. The event, hosted annually by New York's philanthropic circle, was a magnet for the richest and most influential personalities. It was a chance to mingle, to raise money for various causes, and to flash power and status. Harrington and White had been a chief sponsor for the past 3 years. Daniel James Harrington had told him, "We can't skip it. Our firm's entire public relations campaign is anchored on us being present front and center. This is how we attract high-profile clients." Daniel, sitting behind his mahogany desk, stared at the invitation's gold-trimmed edges. The bold lettering read, "Winter Ball, an evening of giving and glamour." He sighed. "I just don't feel up to it, James." His partner, a tall man with sandy hair and an unrelenting optimism, placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Look, I know you've been through a rough patch, but it's time to step out there again. If you don't, you'll never move on." Daniel had half a mind to crumple the invitation. Memories of attending this event with Eleanor the previous year, dressed in matching midnight blue ensembles, dancing under the chandelier, celebrating the expansion of their philanthropic network, still haunted him. Back then, the final stage of divorce was looming, even if they pretended all was well in front of the cameras. But James had a point. Daniel's philanthropic foundation needed exposure, and the firm needed him to show that he was still the confident leader they all relied on. Perhaps the winter ball could mark a turning point, a chance to re-enter society with his head held high. After all, what were the odds? Elena would be there. She'd been traveling the world, seemingly unconcerned with the philanthropic circuit in New York. Reluctantly, he wrote out his acceptance, sealed the envelope, and sent it back. The next day, he forwarded his measurements to his tailor for a new suit, an outward sign that he intended to move forward, even if his heart still lagged behind. The clink of champagne glasses and the resonant echoes of string instruments filled the grand ballroom. Women in sweeping satin gowns floated on the arms of men in crisp tuxedos. A faint scent of pine from the holiday decorations mixed with the sweet aroma of desserts placed at the buffet table. Daniel tried to relax by the refreshment station, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He was never one for too much alcohol, especially not when he needed to keep his wits about him. Around him, clusters of socialites murmured gossip and speculation. Teresa Wilson, a college acquaintance now working for the New York Times, offered him a polite nod from across the room. He returned the gesture, but avoided prolonged eye contact, not in the mood for an in-depth conversation. His eyes scanned the dancing couples, the swirl of color and elegance. Usually he'd find it all mesmerizing. The soft glow of chandeliers overhead, the confident laugh of donors proud to share their wealth, the swirl of philanthropic ambition that actually did some good in the world. But tonight, an uneasy tension weighed on him. Something about the air felt thick, as though the energy in the room was brimming with revelations waiting to be spilled. He stepped away from the crowd, weaving through elegantly dressed men and women. A group of corporate bankers from Goldman Sachs tried to engage him in talk about the stock market's recent fluctuations. Another small cluster from a tech startup pitched their new app. He feigned interest, made a few polite remarks, but found himself inching toward the corner of the room where a sense of quiet serenity reigned, just as he took a seat at a small table beside a pillar draped in silver garlands. His gaze drifted over the dance floor and froze. The murmuring crowd seemed to blur. The music dulled, as if his senses had zeroed in on a single figure. There, standing at the top of the ballroom's ornate staircase, was Elena. She wore a wine-red gown that accentuated her lithe form, her dark hair cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. A hush seemed to envelop him, like a wind had swept through his chest. After all these months, it still felt unreal to see her in person. It wasn't just Elena's presence that paralyzed him. At her sides stood 4 small figures. Children. 2 girls and 2 boys, each no older than 5 or 6. And in the gleam of the chandelier's light, Daniel noticed the most striking detail. Each child's eyes were the same luminous green as his own. His mind reeled. This had to be some sort of trick of the light. It couldn't be. But as Elena stepped forward, guiding them gently down the staircase, the resemblance became even clearer. 4 children with the same color and shape of eyes as Daniel White. A jolt of disbelief electrified his veins. He'd never heard Elena mention children after they split. He hadn't heard a whisper from mutual acquaintances. And now, out of nowhere, these 4 kids appeared, each bearing his most distinctive feature. The glass in his hand trembled. The lively chatter of the ball receded to a low hum. All he could do was watch, transfixed, as Elena and those children moved further into the throng of people, heading unerringly in his direction. Daniel rose slowly, heart pounding. If Elena saw him, she gave no outward sign. She turned to exchange pleasantries with a member of the philanthropic committee, her polite smile carefully in place. The children clung to her hands, one of the little girls glancing shyly around the room. Up close, the resemblance was even more impossible to deny. Each child had inherited the green eyes that were so distinctive in Daniel's family. Each had some subtle aspect of his facial structure, a dimple on the cheek, the angular tilt of the jaw, the gentle curve of the nose. He approached his steps, halting uncertain how to break the barrier of polite society that kept them separated. A swirl of dancers momentarily blocked his path. By the time he emerged into an opening, Eleanor was there, mere feet away, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly. Even amidst the swirl of music and conversation, her voice carried to him, as though they were the only two people in the room. Her accent seemed a touch more pronounced than usual, or perhaps he was just hyper-aware of every detail in this moment. He swallowed, noticing the children shift uncomfortably behind her. "Elena," he managed, forcing out the word. Another breath. "I didn't know you'd be here." Her eyes flickered. The invitation came through an old contact. And, well, I wanted to support the cause. Also, I thought it might be time. Time, he repeated. He let the word linger, casting a glance at the children, who were now standing awkwardly, clearly unsure of what was happening between the grown-ups. Time for what? She hesitated, and her gaze fell to the floor. Then, drawing in a soft breath, she said, "Time for you to meet someone." Turning, she placed a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "Mon chéri," she whispered to the boy on her right. "This is Daniel. He's an old friend of mine." Daniel's heart twisted. Just an old friend. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, and offered a polite greeting. The rest followed suit, each voice small but distinct. Two girls, two boys all in a line. His mind whirled. He couldn't form the words to ask the burning question, the question that screamed for an answer. Instead, he forced a cordial smile. "How do you do?" "We're fine," replied the eldest boy, whose hair was chestnut, just like Daniel's was as a child. "My name's Sebastian." The others introduced themselves, Madeline, Florence, and Thomas. The mention of their names hammered in the reality of their existence. Daniel extended his hand tentatively, and each child shook it with a curious, polite manner that seemed unusual for their ages. At last he turned to Elena with an expression that must have pleaded for some kind of explanation. She read it clearly. "Daniel," she said in a low tone, "I didn't plan on bringing them here to shock you. But I thought maybe this was the right time to tell you the truth." A tumult of anger, confusion, and heartbreak welled up in him. He glanced around, mindful of the many guests who might be watching. "Perhaps we should talk somewhere private." She nodded. "Yes, let's go to the side lounge. The children can stay with my nanny for a moment." She turned and beckoned a woman standing discreetly by the door, who hurried over and led the children away. A dull roar filled Daniel's ears as he and Elena glided along the perimeter of the ballroom. Guests parted to let them pass, and in their curious eyes, Daniel caught glimmers of speculation. Once they reached the smaller adjacent lounge, an ornate room with plush armchairs and soft lighting, they stepped inside and shut the door. The silence in the lounge was suffocating. Elena stood by a fireplace, golden light flickering against her dress. Daniel remained near the door, as though unsure whether to enter fully or bolt. Finally, she motioned him closer. His voice, when it emerged, trembled with barely contained emotion. Are they mine?" Elena studied him, eyes glistening. "Yes," she said, softly. "They are your children." The words struck Daniel like a physical blow. He staggered backward, pressing a hand against the door for support. For a moment it felt as though the world had inverted. The walls closed and his breath caught in his chest. He tried to reconcile the reality of what he'd just heard with the life he'd been living alone, believing fatherhood was a dream that died when his marriage ended. How? Why? He struggled for coherent words. A dozen questions fought for priority in his mind. Why wouldn't you tell me? Why 4 children? Elena. Tears welled in her eyes, and she clasped her hands together. the diamond bracelet on her wrist glinting in the firelight. It's complicated, Daniel. I was pregnant when the divorce became final. I discovered I was carrying twins at first. But there was more to it. It was a complicated pregnancy that I had to keep under the care of a specialized clinic in Geneva. She paused, swallowing hard. I couldn't bring myself to tell you. We were both so angry, so hurt. And after the funeral of your father, I felt like there was no place for me in your life. No place for my burdens. Burdens, he snapped, voice rising. They're children, Eleanor. Our children. You denied me the chance to be a father. She flinched. I know. I was selfish. I was scared. My father convinced me it might be better this way. He wanted me back in Switzerland, away from the complexities of our relationship. A pounding ache built behind Daniel's eyes, half fury, half heartbreak. He remembered Elena's father, André de la Montagne, proud, aristocratic, always disapproving of Daniel's American roots, but 4 of them. Elena, how old are they? She let out a trembling sigh. Sebastian and Madeline are 6. Florence and Thomas are 5. Yes, I was already pregnant once before the divorce process, and it was a complicated timeline. I found out I was expecting Florence and Thomas much later. The pregnancies were nearly back-to-back. I kept it hidden under the chaos of traveling, and I found ways to manage without letting you know. Daniel closed his eyes. Waves of disbelief washing over him. For all this time, you never once sent me a clue. Never told me you'd had them. Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. I wanted to multiple times, but each time I gathered the courage, something stopped me. Your mother's health issues, the business expansions, and your anger. We left things so bitterly. I thought I could protect the children by keeping them away from a toxic environment. She shook her head. I see now. That was a mistake. Mistake. He barked a humorless laugh. It's so much more than that. Elena, you've robbed me of 6 years of fatherhood. I could have known them, raised them. She lowered her head. I'll never be able to make that up to you or to them, but I can try to fix it now if you'll let me. Daniel sank into an armchair, his limbs numb. This revelation turned his world inside out. For so long he'd thought fatherhood was an unreachable horizon, especially after the divorce. Now he had children, 4 living, breathing children who bore his eyes, his features, his lineage. He wanted to hate Eleanor, to rage at her for this injustice. But a quiet voice in his heart reminded him of how he'd once loved her, how complicated their parting had been. You should have told me, he whispered, pressing his palms to his eyes. I would have been there, no matter what was going on between us. That's a choice you made for both of us, and it wasn't yours to make alone. Elena knelt before him, voice quivering. I know. I'm sorry, Daniel. Please let's talk about how to move forward for the children's sake, if nothing else. He looked at her, seeing the raw fear and regret. In the space of a single evening, everything had changed, and he had no idea how to proceed in a way that would heal 6 years of damage. Overcome by the shock of Eleanor's confession, Daniel found his mind spiraling back in time. He remembered the bitter arguments that had led to their divorce, how his father's terminal illness put pressure on him to stay in New York, how Eliana, with her unstoppable career drive, had accepted an offer in Shanghai, simultaneously bristling at Daniel's pleas for her to return. He recalled the day he discovered the plane tickets she'd booked not just for business, but for a possible permanent move overseas. The day he confronted her, they both said things they could never take back. "You'll never be satisfied with who I am," he'd accused. "You don't want a partner, you want a trophy wife." She retorted, eyes blazing. They parted ways, each convinced the other was irredeemable, and in the swirl of attorneys and court proceedings, each attempted to carve out a future free from the other's disappointment. When the divorce finalized, Daniel had felt strangely numb, as if a piece of him had died. He sought solace in building Harrington and White into a powerhouse, throwing himself into philanthropic work, perhaps to fill the void left by the breakdown of his personal life. Now discovering Elena had been pregnant at the time, or just shortly thereafter, turned all his assumptions into lies. He remembered every phone call they missed, every email they'd let go unanswered. They had been so consumed by pride that neither had paused to consider the bigger picture that there might be unborn children deserving of unity and love. In the quiet lounge, Elena was still kneeling by his chair, eyes rimmed with tears. The faint sound of the Winter Ball's orchestra drifted in from beyond the door, an incongruous soundtrack to their shattering revelation. He said softly, "I need to know everything, Elena. No more secrets?" She nodded, standing and moving to the window where she looked out over the city lights. "I found out I was pregnant with Sebastian and Madeline about 4 months before we filed for divorce. But we were in the midst of the biggest fight of our lives. I was traveling for work. I felt alone, and my father persuaded me to stay quiet until I could come home to Switzerland. He never liked you, Daniel, and he wanted me to raise the children by myself." She turned to him, voice trembling. But then I realized I was expecting again Florence and Thomas shortly after the birth of the twins. The pregnancies were a medical miracle and complication. The doctors told me the second was an unusual overlapping pregnancy, extremely rare. I was terrified. I didn't know if I'd survive. There were complications. I was hospitalized for months in Geneva. During that time, my father kept everything hidden from the outside world. I was too weak to fight him. Daniel listened, each word burning into his soul. He envisioned Elena alone in a Swiss clinic battling a perilous pregnancy, while he, thousands of miles away, cursed her name for not being present in his life. A complicated swirl of sorrow, pity, and anger gripped him. And after the births, you just never thought it important enough to pick up the phone. Her eyes flashed with regret. I was scared. I was told you'd moved on, that you resented me. And in truth, I was ashamed for deceiving you. Yes, I let pride and fear dictate my actions. I thought maybe if I raised them alone, I could avoid all that heartbreak, all that anger. But it's been a burden on my conscience, especially as the children have grown and started asking questions about their father. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a moment to let her words settle. He pictured 4 children in a Swiss estate, asking, "Where's Daddy?" and receiving no real answers. The heartbreak coiled tighter in his chest. With trembling conviction, he rose to his feet. I have to meet them properly. They need to know who I am. Elena moved to open the door. Of course. They're just next door with the nanny. Let's go. Stepping into the side corridor, Daniel felt the warm overhead lights shining down on him with an almost glaring intensity. The sweet, festive music in the background felt surreal. He was about to meet his children for the first time in the midst of a glittering winter ball. In a small antechamber, the 4 children sat in a circle with their nanny, a petite woman named Dominique, who was reading them a story to keep them occupied. As soon as Elena and Daniel entered, the children looked up, their wide green eyes fixed on Daniel. Madeline, the older girl, peered at him with curiosity. "You look like me," she said quietly, as if discovering something extraordinary. Daniel knelt, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "I guess we do look alike," he replied. Sebastian, the older boy, placed his hands on his hips with a surprising note of confidence. "Maman says you're very important in New York. Are you a prince or something?" Daniel couldn't help a small smile. "No, I'm not a prince. I just help run a company. And I do some work helping others." Florence, a shy girl, nestled closer to her nanny. "Are you a good man?" she asked, her voice small. The question speared Daniel's heart. He glanced at Elena, who was silently watching, tears shimmering on her lashes. Carefully he answered, "I try to be. I'm not always perfect, but I do my best." Thomas, the youngest, touched Daniel's tie. "I like your tie," he said, smiling. Elena knelt beside Daniel, resting a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Kids, I want you to know that Daniel is someone very important to me, and to you." She paused, her gaze flickering to Daniel. "He's your father." The words settled over the room. There was no thunderous reaction, no immediate meltdown, but rather a kind of hushed awe. Madeline was the first to speak again. "That means you love us." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "More than I can say. Even though we're just meeting, I already feel that you're the most precious gift I could have." Sebastian studied Daniel with a pensive look. "Then why didn't you come see us before?" A flash of guilt twisted inside Daniel, though the fault wasn't truly his. But how could he explain that? He glanced at Elena, who placed a gentle hand on Sebastian's shoulder. "That's my fault," she said. "I didn't tell him where we were. Sometimes adults make mistakes." Her admission left the children quiet. They seemed to accept it with a resilience that only children possess. Slowly, Thomas reached up and touched Daniel's hair, as if to confirm he was real. Daniel felt his heart break and mend all at once. He opened his arms hesitantly, offering an embrace. One by one, the children stepped forward. Madeline first, then Sebastian, then the others, their small arms wrapped around him, and for a moment he closed his eyes, letting the warmth of their presence wash over him. He didn't notice the tall figure standing in the corridor until someone cleared his throat. Daniel looked up to see James Harrington, his business partner and longtime friend, wearing an expression of utter shock. Daniel, James said, struggling for composure. I've been looking for you, but I see you're preoccupied." His eyes roved over the 4 children. "Are these?" Daniel nodded, still holding on to the children. "Yes." "Mine." James stood there, mouth slightly open. But he rallied quickly, offering a small congratulatory nod. "I see. Well, I'll leave you to your reunion." He turned to go, then paused, giving Daniel a pointed look that seemed to say, "We need to talk." Daniel knew with a sinking feeling that his entire life, personal and professional, had just undergone a seismic shift. Everything from finances to living arrangements to his carefully curated public image would change once it became public knowledge that he had 4 children he'd never mentioned. And in his mind, he couldn't help wondering if more secrets were lurking behind Elena's sudden reappearance. Later that evening, after ensuring the children were settled in a quiet corner, with Dominique, Danielle, and Elena slipped away to find more privacy. They went up a short flight of stairs, ending up on a balcony overlooking the ballroom floor. Below them, the party continued in full swing, glittering gowns, twinkling lights, the hum of polite conversation. He stared down at the swirling crowd, then turned to Elena. "This is a lot to take in, Elena. Are you certain no uncertainties about their paternity? She flinched at the question. They're yours, Daniel. I swear it on everything I hold dear. His face softened. I want to believe you. But you have to understand my perspective. You hid them from me for 6 years. Her cheeks turned pink. I understand. If you want a paternity test, I won't stop you. Anything to give you peace of mind. He nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for doubting her. I'm sorry. It's just, this is so unexpected. She waved off the apology with a trembling hand. I deserve your suspicion, but I have no reason to lie now. My father, he urged me to cut you out of our lives entirely. He was never going to let you know about them. But they kept asking. They wanted to know why they didn't have a daddy like other children. And as they grew older, their resemblance to you grew more obvious. A wave of anger coursed through Daniel. Your father, he's the one who convinced you to hide them from me. She shook her head. I let him. I was emotionally weak, recovering from the pregnancies far from home. I can't blame him entirely. The mention of André de la Montagne sparked an old resentment in Daniel. Elena's father had never hidden his contempt for Daniel's lack of noble pedigree and the American approach to business. But to manipulate a situation this profoundly was beyond cruel. You realize this is going to change everything, Daniel said. I need to speak to a lawyer, figure out custody financial arrangements. And the children, how do we help them adjust? Elena's face showed weariness, but also relief that Daniel was taking responsibility instead of pushing them away. I've already spoken to a lawyer about my return to the States. I'm prepared to stay in New York if that's what it takes. He eyed her wary. And your job? She sighed. I stepped back from my international projects. Right now, I'm focusing on philanthropic work. My father doesn't approve, but that doesn't matter anymore. My priority is the children. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He recalled how they once dreamed of having children, raising them in a home full of love and mutual respect. That dream had crumbled. Now faced with reality, they had to figure out how to pick up the pieces and build something stable for 4 innocent lives. How do we start? He asked softly. Elena's lips curved into a sad smile. Perhaps by letting them know we both love them, that we're both here for them. Everything else can come later. For tonight, let's just be there for them. As the evening wore on, Daniel felt guilt creeping in. The 4 children, his children, were clearly bewildered by this sudden introduction. While they bravely tried to interact with Daniel, he sensed their uncertainty. After all, in their young minds, he was a stranger who happened to share their eyes, face shape, and last name. He tried to be jovial with them, kneeling to their level, listening to their half-formed stories about Switzerland, about their school, about the snow-capped mountains they missed. But inside, he was consumed by a swirl of emotions. He'd missed their first steps, first words, birthdays, 6 years of precious moments. And then came another jolt. During a lull, Madeline quietly asked, "Is Hans coming too?" Daniel glanced at Elena. Confusion etched on his face. Elena's expression stiffened. "We'll talk about that later, sweetheart," she said hastily. Hands Daniel pressed. Elena hesitated, then cleared her throat. I've been seeing someone, a colleague from work. It's not serious, but the children know him. He was around as a friend. A sharp pang of jealousy, anger, and betrayal shot through Daniel. That was only natural. Eleanor was no longer his wife, and she had every right to date. But the thought that another man, had been a figure in his children's lives, even if just tangentially set his teeth on edge. He fought to keep his voice calm. "So he's been around the children," Elena nodded, looking away. "They like him, Daniel. He's been kind to them." Daniel swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. "I see," Sebastian piped up. "Hans takes us sledding. He helped me make a birdhouse once. The image of another man, stepping into fatherly roles, stung Daniel deeply. Yet he forced a polite nod. "That's nice of him." Elena quickly changed the subject, offering the children a plate of mini pastries from a passing waiter. But Daniel's thoughts lingered on Hans. He wondered if Hans had become a paternal figure, if the children would look to him instead of Daniel. By the time the ball was winding down, Daniel had endured the well-meaning small talk of acquaintances who admired the adorable children, asking whose they were. He offered vague smiles and quick answers, uncertain how to handle such personal inquiries. Outside, the snowfall had intensified, blanketing the city in white. Daniel stood with the children under the glowing street lamps, waiting as a valet brought around 2 cars. He felt an unspoken tension with Elena by his side. They were 2 estranged individuals, forced back together by the existence of these 4 precious lives. "Where are you staying tonight?" he asked her. "At the Ritz, for now," she replied. "I didn't know how you'd react, so I didn't make longer-term arrangements." He nodded. "That's fine. Look, tomorrow I'd like to spend more time with them. Can we arrange that?" Elena studied him, relief softening her features. "Of course. They need to know their father." Daniel forced a tiny smile at the word father, still grappling with the weight of it. Then, as the children climbed into the waiting SUV, Daniel laid a gentle hand on Elena's arm. "Thank you for telling me, even if it's late." She gave him a somber nod. "And I'm sorry." In the hush of the swirling snow, Daniel watched as the vehicle pulled away. He stood there a long time, staring into the winter night, silently vowing that whatever happened next, he wouldn't abandon those children. No matter how painful the transition, they were his, and he was theirs. The following morning, Daniel woke in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Sleep had eluded him for much of the night visions of 4 bright-eyed faces populating his restless dreams. He rose early, brewing a pot of strong coffee as he mulled over the next step. He called his mother Carol White, who lived in a quiet suburb in Connecticut. It was time she heard the news. When he told her she had 4 grandchildren, the coffee mug almost slipped from his hand as he heard her reaction. First she stammered in disbelief, then sobbed, then erupted in joy mingled with confusion and a tinge of anger at Eleanor's secrecy. Despite everything, Carol couldn't wait to meet them. Daniel also placed a call to James Harrington, who demanded an explanation. They arranged to meet in the Harrington and White boardroom that afternoon, once Daniel had a chance to visit with his newly discovered family. A text beeped on Daniel's phone just as he stepped into the hallway. "Elena, we're at the Central Park Zoo with the kids. Meet us here if you can." Daniel hurried to dress, donning a casual sweater and coat. The crisp winter air bit at his cheeks as he strode down the block, weaving past holiday shoppers and carriage horses. The sense of surreal anticipation made his heart pound. At the zoo's entrance, he found Elena and the children watching seals swim in a large tank. The children spotted him first, waving excitedly. His chest warmed at their enthusiasm. He approached with a smile. "Hey guys," Sebastian grabbed his hand. "Look at the seals, Papa." The casual use of Papa startled Daniel, but he squeezed the boy's hand in response, a lump forming in his throat. Elena noticed his reaction. "They adapt quickly," she murmured, eyes bright with unshed tears. They strolled along, admiring the polar bears and penguins, occasionally stopping to buy hot cocoa. Daniel tried to soak in every detail, how Madeline tugged on his sleeve to show him her favorite animals. How Thomas giggled when the penguins waddled, how Florence shyly stuck close to Elena, how Sebastian asked a million questions about everything. They were a family moving in a loose cluster, forging a tender sense of unity. Yet Daniel couldn't help noticing a shadow in Elena's gaze, as if she were keeping another secret. After a while, Sebastian raced ahead. "Papa, there's an ice sculpture over there." Elena and Daniel lagged behind, exchanging a look. "They're incredible," Daniel remarked. "Smart, curious. I'm amazed at how they each have their own personality." Elena smiled. "You would have made a wonderful father, Daniel." He regarded her intently. "Is there anything else you haven't told me? Because right now I need the truth. Everything." She sighed, glancing away. "There is something else, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up. It's about Thomas. He's had some health issues since he was born prematurely." Alarm raced through Daniel. "Health issues? Is he okay?" "He's mostly fine," Elena said quickly. "But he has a minor heart condition. The doctors say it's manageable with medication and monitoring. He might need surgery in the future, but there's a good chance he won't." Daniel's face paled. "My God, Elena, you should have told me. I'd have been there for him." She placed a hand on his arm. "I know. This is what I regret most. I'm ready to set things right now. I've brought them here so we can live in New York for a while, see specialists if needed, and ensure he gets the best care. I'll bear any cost if you want." Daniel's response was immediate. "No. We'll share it. He's my son, our son. I'll do whatever it takes to help him." Emotions swarmed in Eleanor's eyes, relief mingled with sorrow. "Thank you." Their conversation was cut short by the children's excited calls. They hurried over, trying to smile and laugh as if everything was normal. But for Daniel, each moment with the children was a reminder of what he'd missed and of the challenges to come. After the zoo, they decided to warm up at a nearby cafe, a cozy establishment known for its artisan pastries. The children devoured mini croissants while Elena sipped a cappuccino, and Daniel hovered protectively, noticing every detail about his new family members. Between bites of pastry, Florence hesitantly asked Papa, "Do you have a nice house?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I have an apartment. It's big enough for all of you if you ever want to visit." Madeline's face lit up. "Can we see it?" Eleanor shot Daniel a questioning glance. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" He took a moment before nodding. "Yes. I'd like them to see where I live. I have a spare room that can be turned into something for them." So it was decided. They gathered their things and took a quick taxi ride to Daniel's penthouse overlooking Central Park. The building's doorman, Mr. Bartholomew, nearly dropped his cap upon seeing Daniel leading 4 children by the hand. "Elena. Kids?" "This is home," Daniel said, opening his front door. The foyer was sleek and modern, perhaps too sterile for children's tastes. Sebastian's eyes widened at the floor-to-ceiling windows, while Madeline squealed with delight at the view of the snowy treetops and distant skyscrapers. They spread out, exploring. Elena followed them, pointing out paintings and artifacts Daniel had collected. Her gaze stopped on a photo of Daniel's parents. "Your mother will be ecstatic," she said. "She's already invited all of you to spend Christmas in Connecticut," Daniel replied. A flicker of fear touched Elena's face. It might be overwhelming to meet your entire family so soon. He shrugged gently. They're the children's family too, Elena. We can take it slow. I just want them to feel welcomed. She nodded, watching Thomas run giggling across the living room's polished floor. They deserve a big family Christmas. They've never really had that. A warm feeling grew in Daniel's chest. Maybe despite the heartbreak, they could form a family dynamic, if not as husband and wife, then at least as coring co-parents. Suddenly, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. Daniel lingered, an uneasy feeling creeping over him. A few minutes later, Elena returned, face ashen. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's Hans," she said, voice tight. "He's in New York. He wants to see me and the children." Daniel felt a sudden wave of protectiveness, almost territorial. He has no claim on them. I'm their father. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. It's not that simple. The kids know him. They care for him. But I'm here now, Daniel insisted, trying to quell the anger. I won't just stand by while some stranger plays father. She looked torn. I understand. I'll talk to him. Just, please don't make this more complicated than it has to be. Daniel exhaled, controlling his temper. Fine. But I want to be present for any meeting. The children need stability, not confusion. Elena nodded, and the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. But the mere prospect of Hans stepping into the picture threatened to upend the fragile dynamic Daniel and Elena were beginning to forge. Over the next few days, Daniel spent every spare moment with his children. He took them to the Museum of Natural History, where they marveled at dinosaur skeletons and celestial exhibits. He showed them Rockefeller Center's towering Christmas tree, letting them watch the ice skaters gliding beneath twinkling lights. Those days were some of the happiest Daniel had experienced in a long time, yet a lingering worry about Hans hovered in the back of his mind. Would Hans try to disrupt his reconnection with the children? One afternoon, while Elena and the children were napping in their suite at the Ritz, Daniel went to his office to meet James Harrington. Sitting in the sleek boardroom with glass walls overlooking Manhattan, Daniel braced for James's barrage of questions, so James began leaning forward. 4 kids. Daniel. You have no idea the shockwaves this is causing among our investors and clients. They're all calling me asking if there's some scandal or if we've been hiding something. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. I didn't know, James. Believe me, this was as much a surprise to me as it was to the world. James studied him intently. Do you believe Elena's story? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. She's done a DNA test already. Or at least she's offered it. I believe her. They have my eyes, for God's sake. James exhaled. All right. So how are we handling this from a PR standpoint? Daniel thought for a moment. We release a brief statement saying I've recently become aware of my children that I intend to fulfill all my responsibilities as a father and that the details remain private. That should suffice. I don't want to exploit my kids' private lives. James agreed. But be aware the media might spin it. Elena was high profile in the finance world too. They'll probably dig up old dirt. Daniel nodded, crossing his arms. Let them dig. I just care about the kids right now. They're my top priority. James softened, offering Daniel a supportive smile. You've always wanted a family, man. Maybe this is your chance. Just be careful with Elena. She's unpredictable. Daniel gave a mirthless chuckle. Trust me, I know. After the meeting, Daniel returned to the Ritz, a sense of determination fueling him. He wanted to talk to Elena about officially moving back to the US with the children. But when he arrived, he found her in tears in the lounge. She looked up, eyes puffy. "Hans." He confronted me. He demanded to see the children. He's threatening legal action, claiming he's acted as a de facto parent. Daniel's blood ran cold. He has no legal claim. He's not their father. Elena sniffed, wiping her cheeks. He's not listed on any birth certificates, of course, but he's threatening to tell the tabloids about everything about how I hid the children from you, about the details of our finances. He wants money, Daniel. Daniel ground his teeth. "So he's blackmailing you?" She nodded miserably. "I broke things off with him as soon as I decided to come to New York. He didn't take it well. Now he's furious." Rage coursed through Daniel, but he forced himself to remain calm. "We'll handle it. I'll talk to my lawyers, and we'll put a stop to his threats. The children won't be used as pawns." Eleanor looked at him with gratitude. "I'm sorry, Daniel. It seems every time you try to fix things, I bring another complication." He gently took her hand. "We'll get through it. Together. For the kids." That evening, an unexpected phone call shattered the fragile calm. Hans called Daniel directly. His tone was aggressive, laced with bitterness. "You think you can just waltz back into Elena's life and claim those children?" Hans spat. "I've been the one helping them for years." Daniel clenched his jaw. "They're my children, Hans. My blood." Hans laughed harshly. "Your blood, sure. But I was there when Eleanor needed help. If you had any decency, you'd let me at least see them." Daniel paused, wrestling with the primal urge to tell Hans to stay away forever. But he also recognized that the children knew Hans. Forcing them to lose him abruptly might be traumatic. "We can discuss a supervised meeting," Daniel conceded. "But if you try anything, any attempt at blackmail, I'll see you in court." Hans scoffed. "You think your money and power can scare me?" Elena's father tried that. He didn't succeed. Daniel ended the call, fury boiling in his veins. Elena, who stood nearby, watched him with anxious eyes. "We'll do a supervised meeting," he told her. "It might help the children's transition if they can say goodbye or set boundaries. But he's not going to threaten us anymore." She nodded, tears of relief shining. "Thank you for handling this." They set the meeting for the next day in the presence of lawyers at a neutral law office. The children arrived with Elena subdued and confused. Hans was already there, face pinched with anger. When the children ran to greet him, Daniel's stomach twisted. Hans cast a smug glance Daniel's way, as if to say, "See, they're mine in spirit." But Sebastian, after hugging Hans briefly, hurried to Daniel's side. "Papa, are you okay?" Daniel's heart soared at the simple question, the child's concern for him. "I'm fine, buddy," he murmured, tousling Sebastian's hair. The negotiations that followed were tense. Hans wanted continued contact, threatening to leak scandalous information. Eleanor confessed that Hans had personal emails and financial records that could be damaging if taken out of context. Daniel's lawyer threatened Hans with a defamation suit if he went public. Finally, they reached a precarious agreement. Hans would receive a severance of sorts, a lump sum from Elena's personal funds, and would agree to no future contact with the children unless they requested it themselves once they were of age. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it would stave off immediate scandal and harassment. The children seemed unsettled as Hans gave them a final hug. Thomas clung to him for a moment, tears glistening in his eyes. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight, but he tried to remain stoic. Hans left abruptly, slamming the door behind him. Outside the office, Eleanor knelt to comfort the children, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel joined them, feeling the weight of these events pressing down on their small shoulders. In that moment, he promised himself he would never let them feel abandoned again. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Elena and the children moved into a rented townhouse near Daniel's apartment. Daniel spent his weekends showing them American traditions, like decorating a Christmas tree, baking cookies, and practicing English holiday carols. The day finally came for the children to meet Carol White, their grandmother, in Connecticut. Despite the tension and swirling emotions, the meeting was a joyous occasion. Carol wept openly as she embraced each of her grandchildren, scolding Elena only briefly for keeping them hidden for so long. Christmas morning found them all gathered in Carol's cozy living room. Snow fell softly outside. The children squealed over presents, and Elena found herself welcomed warmly, surprisingly so, by Carol's motherly grace. Daniel, dressed in a comfy sweater, took time to reflect on how drastically his life had changed in mere weeks. He now had the family he had once dreamed about, though not in the way he'd imagined. Eleanor and Daniel still had much to resolve. Their romantic relationship remained uncertain. Old wounds and betrayals lingered, but so did a lingering thread of love. They'd begun counseling, determined to co-parent effectively. Whether or not they would reconcile as a couple remained to be seen. One late night after the children had gone to bed, Daniel and Elena sat on his penthouse balcony. The city lights twinkled below the hush of snow, making the moment feel magical. Elena leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you think we could ever be a family again?" she asked. Daniel slipped an arm around her, 1,000 thoughts flooding his mind. "I think we already are a family," he said softly. "Maybe not the conventional kind, but we'll figure it out." Elena gazed at him, a small smile curving her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us another chance." He closed his eyes, inhaling the crisp winter air. "Thank you for letting me be a father." They sat there for a long while, listening to the distant hum of the city, their hearts brimming with the complicated, fragile hope of a new beginning. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of heartbreak, hidden children, and the fragile hope of new beginnings. Daniel's story reminds us that even through betrayal and pain, love and forgiveness can lead to unexpected miracles. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world. See you in the next story.